Uh, as you know, Venerable J. Way did a dissertation, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that, but she contacted me to depict her research, depicting it in several ways. So we're actually starting for this purpose at the beginning of the exhibition, which would be as you walk in. You've done the title wall, and now you're going to go to the timeline. I brought some of the timeline with me and put it up here. It's actually 23 of these episodes. It spans about 21 feet. And we put the beginning and end up. Those dots are the dots. Yeah. Do we expect you to know every one of these? Heck no. And so what I've done is, I'm going to give these out to you in a little bit. In one of the little books in your packets is the Docent Basic Skills. Patricia, some of you were here last time. Ching gave you that last time. This one is going to be the content, and it's very briefly provided for you. All the buzzwords are going to be here, okay? In fact, we're going to use buzzwords today a lot. So, I'll pass these out in a little bit. Don't feel like you have to take notes. You've got a 9-page sheet in your handout folder that covers it in some more detail than you want. And then you're going to have this that gives it to you briefly. But here's the best news. Everything that you're going to say is already going to be on the wall, other than your own personal comments. So the timeline will be on the wall as you walk in, raised. How do we explain that? There's kind of a ledge wall, and it will be running across that, the entire left side as they walk in. So I'm going to cover that now real quick. Spans about 1,000 years. I am going to kill myself on this. Okay, starting with Buddha's birth, of course. And here's what you need to know. Not too much. I'm going to give you a buzzword. Buddha got born. There's the B. Bzz. Okay. We are not giving you an exact date, although we say on there 560 BCE. Someone asked a question last week about BCE. How do you explain this? In academia, BC and AD is kind of a passé, and they're saying Common Era and before Common Era. So we're using those terms here. Makes sense in a Buddhist situation anyway. So BCE would be before Common Era, or BC.
Is that going to be all in your little book? Or do you take notes?
Do not bother. I'm pretty sure everything you need's in here. It's probably more than you need, because remember, how long are these tours? What, 10 minutes? You couldn't possibly, and they're not going to ask you. And here's the thing, Ching is right. If you don't know an answer, say, I don't know, because guess who's going to be there? Hello, the researcher, and me, because if they have a question about the art, I can answer it. If they have a question about the content, she can answer it. Unless she's in the restroom, we're going to be there all the time. Okay, so what we're saying is Buddha was born sometime between 500 and 600 BCE, right? We're not going to pin it down, though the timeline does. The next thing is Buddha dies. We have an approximate year. Here's your buzzword. He dies approximately age 80, and after his death, Buddhism grows in India over the next 200 years. They divided his ashes up amongst, 8 clans, and each one built one of these interesting stupas over it. So it's very Indian presentation here. So there's a steady growth of Buddhism in India. The next thing that happens is the councils of monks. There are 3 of these. One happened shortly after his death, the second about 100 years after, and the third is this one, at the time of King Ashoka, a very important person in history. So we're putting the 3rd monk council is held at Patna here. What the monks did was, you can tell. I don't want to get this wrong.
Not for a party, right?
Well, what the monks did was review the canon. Remember that everything was passed on by word of mouth. So you know what it is like, right? You take notes. Now Nancy speaks. All of you try to remember. Imagine. 1 week later, you get together. What does it sound like? Nothing like what she said, probably. So it was a council to bring everybody, all the different versions to come together and consolidate the versions.
That's just what I was going to say. That's right. So that's really our 3rd one. After there it is, 3rd one. After this, there's a bunch of these combined, but King Ashoka is quite a champion for Buddhism. He is a convert, and he promulgates it across the region. By the time he's dead, it's all over the area of Kushan and Bactria. So the next several of these in the timeline, that's where we stop, are going to cover some of the monuments, stupas, areas, settlements as Buddhism grows through Central Asia. All right. Next, this Gandhara is probably one of the most interesting places. It's really kind of a region and not a city so much, but it was at Gandhara that we think that the beginning of Mahayana Buddhism started. It's the first place we see the Bodhisattva Kuan Yin. Also, they began to translate the scriptures into a language, Gandhari, which is a lot like Pali, or like Sanskrit. And so there's this interesting blend that occurs here, because prior to this time, the Greeks had come here and brought sculptures. And if you look at the Gandhara Buddha statues, they look very Greek. That's because they are taken from the Greco-Roman time and style, and I'll have other ones up here. Unbelievable. It's just like going to the museum in Athens, huh, Dave? And you look at these statues of Buddha that look just like they're from Greece. So that interesting blend of cultures happens. Now Buddhism begins to reach China on the Silk Road. Don't forget the Silk Road opened the 2nd century BCE, and so it gets there little by little. The first Buddhist temple in China happens to be built in Luoyang, which is the place where the parade that we're featuring in this takes place. It's called the White Horse Temple, and it still stands. That's a photo of it. So at this point, there's more translation of texts, and people begin to try to go to India to bring back and transcribe more information. And that's what these are showing you. Actually, I drew lines between these to show you that there's the Mahayana school. That's one of the Bodhisattva heads that looks just like Greece. The Greco-Roman style at Gandhara, and the Kushan ruler in that area disseminates Buddhism. In China, at the very same time, the White Horse Temple is built and the Chinese translations take place. So that's, the timeline continues. This, the caves. Cave artistry really catches on in the area, and for the next few centuries, Buddhist centers of learning are set up. This is the Bamiyan cave here, but this cave art begins to become popular in the region. These are gigantic 63-meter Buddhas carved out of it's like granite. Very difficult to destroy, although invaders tried many times and couldn't really do it. So the cave art begins to travel eastward on the Silk Road to Kizel, which is up at Kucha, one of our main cities. We'll talk about Dunhuang, we'll also talk about Luoyang, which is the place of our mural, and other Silk Road locations. And there's an increase in these Buddhist centers of thought and learning. It's just spreading throughout the region. So these next few show you some of the settlements and caves around the Tarim Basin. Text translation. This is a picture, a statue of Kumara Jiva, who a lot of you know. And the reason you know him is if you take the Diamond Sutra class here, the book they're using is Kumara Jiva's translation. He translated about 100 works. Many of them are still in use today. And where he did this was this translation bureau in Chang'an. Chang'an is today's Xi'an. It's the same place. So if you've heard of Xi'an, where the terracotta warriors are, well, that used to be called Chang'an, and that's what we're talking about here. But so he and Faxian, who's a Chinese pilgrim, worked in that translation bureau, translating these texts. And of course, that helps the Chinese to adopt Buddhism. So there's Kumarajiva. The cave art is begun at Dunhuang by monks, and Faxian takes a pilgrimage. And this is the guy, let me tell you. Faxian has to be the hero of this talk, because he decides to take a trip to India to bring back sutras and things to translate on foot at my age. He was over 60. Oops, did I just slip and give my age? I'm sorry, a little older than me. Yeah. He actually walks to Gandhara and picks up stuff in the 60s. This guy is unbelievable. That's his little picture walking. Yep. And then the end of the timeline, we're going to end in Loyang with the mural. But you can see the Buddhist caves at Kizil, Longmun Crypts, and then this is more sending of people to India. So this pretty much takes care of the timeline. So I'm going to say have fun with the timeline.